Some secrets are hidden, but some secrets are sealed, locked away so completely that even time itself cannot erase them. For years, people believed this house was empty, abandoned, forgotten, just another structure slowly fading into history. But they were wrong, because what was hidden inside was never meant to be found, and the only thing standing between the truth and the outside world was a single wall. If you are drawn to dark history, hidden secrets, and stories that were never meant to be uncovered, then subscribe to Shadows of History, because what was sealed inside this house changed everything. At the far edge of a quiet countryside, where the road narrows and the trees begin to close in, there stood a house, old, still, and untouched. It had been there longer than most of the people in the nearby town, long enough that no one remembered when it was built, and even longer since anyone had last lived inside it. But what made the house different was not its age. It was its silence, not the normal silence of an empty place, but a deeper kind of silence, the kind that feels intentional, the kind that makes you stop for a moment and listen, even when you know there's nothing there. The house sat alone, slightly off the road, its wooden structure still standing strong, its windows covered from the inside, and its front door locked, not broken, not damaged, locked, as if someone had closed it carefully and made sure it would stay that way. For years, no one questioned it. People simply avoided it. If you asked about the house, you wouldn't get a clear answer. Some would say it was abandoned, others would say it was cursed, and a few would say nothing at all. They would just look away, as if even speaking about it was something they had learned not to do. Children were warned to stay away from that road. Travelers were told to take a different path, and the few who passed by the house never stopped long enough to look inside. But the strangest part of all was not what people said, it was what they didn't say, because no one ever explained why the house was closed or what had happened inside, only that it had been that way for years, many years, long enough for the story to fade, long enough for the truth to disappear, or at least that's what people believed. Until the day someone decided to open it. The new owner was not from the town. He had no connection to its history, no reason to fear it. To him, the house was just property, old but usable, something that could be repaired, restored, brought back to life. When he told the people in town about his plan, their reactions were subtle but clear. They didn't argue. They didn't try to stop him, but their silence spoke louder than words. One man finally said something. An older man, who had lived in that town his entire life. "If you open that house," he said slowly, "be careful what you bring back with it." The owner frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" he asked. The old man paused, then looked toward the direction of the house, as if remembering something he had tried to forget. "Some things," he said quietly, "are sealed for a reason." The warning was strange, but not enough to stop him. A few days later, he returned with workers, tools, supplies, everything needed to begin the job. To them, this was just another project, an abandoned house, a simple restoration, nothing more. The road leading to the house had not been used in years. Grass had grown over parts of it, branches leaned inward, forming a tunnel of shadows. Even during the day, the light struggled to reach the end of the path, and at the end of that path, the house waited, exactly as it had been left, unmoving, unchanged, watching. The workers approached slowly, not out of fear, but out of instinct, because something about the place felt different. The air was heavier, the silence deeper, and the feeling that they were not entirely alone was impossible to ignore. "Let's get started," the owner said. One of the workers stepped forward and examined the front door. The lock was old, but intact. That alone was unusual. Most abandoned houses showed signs of damage, broken entries, forced openings, but this house had been sealed properly, as if no one had ever tried to get in, or no one had ever dared. The worker raised his hammer and struck the lock. The sound echoed through the trees. Sharp, loud, out of place. He struck it again, and then again. On the third strike, the lock broke. The door creaked open slowly, and with it, the silence broke. Dust rose into the air immediately. Floating through the light, as it entered the house for the first time in years. The workers stepped inside carefully. The floor creaked beneath them, but it held. The room was exactly as it had been left. A table, chairs, a cabinet, everything in place. Nothing overturned. Nothing disturbed. It didn't look abandoned. It looked paused, as if someone had walked out and never returned. "That's not normal," one worker said quietly. "What?" the owner asked. "This," the worker replied, looking around. "It's like no time passed here." And he was right, because inside the house, time had not moved forward. It had stopped. The workers continued through the rooms. Each one told the same story. Stillness, silence, absence, but not emptiness. And then, they reached the hallway. The space was narrow, dimly lit, and at the end of it, a wall. Nothing unusual at first. Just another wall in an old house. But something didn't feel right. The owner stopped walking, turned slowly, and looked back toward the entrance. Then back at the wall. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "What doesn't?" a worker asked. "The size," the owner replied. "The house is bigger from the outside." The workers exchanged glances. Then one of them stepped forward. He placed his hand against the wall. Cold, still, solid. But when he knocked on it, the sound that came back was not what he expected. Not thick, not heavy, but hollow. He knocked again. The same sound. The hallway fell silent. The workers stepped back slowly. "That's not a normal wall," he said. The owner stepped forward, placed his own hand against it, then knocked. The sound echoed again. Hollow, like there was space behind it. A space that should not exist. A space that had been hidden for years. The owner stared at the wall, and in that moment, the house was no longer just a building. It was something else. Something waiting. Something sealed. Something that had remained hidden for far too long. And whatever was behind that wall had been there all this time, in complete darkness, waiting to be found before the house was sealed, before the silence settled in, and long before the wall was built. There was a family. They were not strangers to the town, but they were never truly part of it either. People knew of them, but no one really knew them. They lived at the edge of everything, at the far end of the road, in the same house that would one day become untouchable. The father was a quiet man. He worked with his hands. Wood, repairs, structures. The kind of man who didn't need to speak much, because his work spoke for him. When he came into town, he kept his distance, finished his business quickly, and left, always leaving before sunset. The mother was different. Not louder, not more open, but more aware. Her eyes moved constantly, watching people, watching the road, watching everything around her, as if she was waiting for something, or fearing something. And then there was the child, a young girl, small, silent, always holding something in her hands. A toy, a simple wooden toy, something she never let go of. People noticed her, not because she spoke, but because she didn't. She would stand quietly beside her mother, looking at things longer than most children would, listening, even when there was nothing to hear. One woman in the town once said something strange about her. "She doesn't look scared," the woman said. "She looks like she's listening to something we can't hear." At the time, no one thought much of it. Children are strange sometimes, quiet sometimes, different sometimes. But looking back, that moment felt different, like a detail that didn't belong. A sign that something was already wrong. The family followed a pattern. They came into town once every few weeks, bought supplies, spoke very little, and returned home before dark. Always before dark. That part never changed. No matter the season, no matter the weather, no matter what. They never stayed after sunset. At first, people assumed it was just habit. Then it became noticeable. And eventually, it became something people quietly wondered about. But no one asked, because some questions feel unnecessary, until they become important. And by then, it's usually too late. Time passed. Seasons changed. And slowly, the family stopped coming into town. At first, it wasn't obvious. A missed visit here. A longer gap there. But eventually, people noticed. Weeks turned into months, and no one had seen them. No one had spoken to them. No one had gone to check on them, because the house at the end of the road had already started to become something else. Something distant. Something avoided. Some assumed the family had moved away. Quietly. During the night. Others believed something must have happened. But without proof. The town chose the easier answer. They left. That was enough. Enough to stop asking questions. Enough to move on. Enough to forget. But not everyone was convinced. A traveler passing through the area stopped near the house one evening. His horse was tired. The road was quiet. And the house, though strange, still looked like a place someone might live. He approached slowly, climbed the porch, and knocked on the door. Once. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. He turned to leave. And that was when he heard it. A sound. Faint. Almost too quiet to notice. He froze. Turned back slowly. And stepped closer to the door. Pressed his ear against the wood. And listened. At first. Nothing. Then. Knock. 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 Soft. Slow. Weak. Not coming from the door itself. But from somewhere deeper inside the house. Or somewhere behind it. Or somewhere. Hidden. The traveler stepped back immediately. His face changed. What was that? He whispered to himself. He knocked on the door again. Harder this time. Hello, he called out. Is anyone inside? No answer. Only silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. He waited for a few seconds more. Then left. The next morning, he told people in town what he had heard. Most of them dismissed it. Old houses make noise. Wood shifts. Probably an animal. But the traveler shook his head. That wasn't wood, he said quietly. That was someone knocking. The room grew quiet, but no one responded, because accepting what he said would mean accepting something else. Something no one wanted to think about. That someone might still be inside that house. And if that were true, then something had gone terribly wrong. A few days later, another man decided to see for himself. He had heard the story, and curiosity brought him closer. He didn't knock on the door. Instead, he walked around the house, slowly, carefully, observing everything. And that was when he noticed something strange. Near the base of the house, there was a narrow opening, a crawl space, dark, small, almost hidden. He crouched down and looked inside. At first, there was nothing, just darkness. But then, he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. The same sound. Slow, faint, coming from below, from behind something, from somewhere that should have been empty. He stepped back quickly, heart racing, and in that moment, the house no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied, but not in a normal way, in a way that didn't make sense. He returned to town, told what he had heard. This time, people listened, not openly, not loudly, but they listened, because now there were two stories, two different people, the same sound, the same place, and the same unsettling detail. Knocking. From inside. From behind. From somewhere hidden. Two men eventually agreed to go to the house together. Not to solve anything. Not to investigate deeply. Just to confirm. To prove it was nothing. To silence the story. They went during the day. When fear feels smaller. When light makes everything easier to explain. When the world feels normal. When they reached the house, they noticed something immediately. The windows. Covered. From the inside. Wooden boards nailed across them. Not broken. Not damaged. Placed there carefully. Deliberately. The men exchanged glances. Then one of them knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. Then the second man moved toward the side of the house. Toward the crawl space. He stopped suddenly. What is it? The first man asked. The second man didn't answer. He was listening. And then, they both heard it. Knock. 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 Clear. Real. Undeniable. Coming from inside, from behind the wall. The men stood frozen. Neither of them moved. Because in that moment, everything changed. The story was no longer a rumor. It was real. And if it was real, then the truth was something much darker than anyone had imagined. The family had not left. They had not disappeared. They had not gone anywhere. They were still there. Somewhere inside that house. But instead of breaking the wall, instead of opening the house, instead of finding the truth, they stepped back and walked away. Because fear is stronger than curiosity. and sometimes stronger than responsibility. That decision, that single moment, was the moment everything was lost. Because after that day, no one returned. No one knocked again. No one listened again. The house was left alone, sealed, silent, and whatever was inside remained there, unseen, unheard, and slowly forgotten for years, until now, until the wall was finally about to be broken. That be why the time the workers stood in that narrow hallway, staring at the wall that shouldn't exist. The house was no longer just a place. It had become a question that had been ignored for years. It had been sealed, closed off, hidden behind a wall, and left that way for years. The question was no longer, what is this place? The question now was, why was it sealed and who was inside? And the answer was still somewhere in that room, waiting, in the silence, in the darkness, in the things that had been left behind. Because whatever happened here did not end when the wall was built. It ended slowly, over time, behind that wall, where no one could see, and no one came to open it. By the time the wall was completely gone, the house was no longer hiding anything. It had already revealed enough to change the story, enough to destroy the lie that had been believed for years. But the truth was still incomplete, because what they had found was only the beginning. The real answer was still waiting. Inside the room, the air felt heavier now, not just inside the hidden space, but throughout the entire house, as if something had shifted, as if something that had been buried for years was finally rising to the surface. The owner stood just inside the room, looking around slowly, carefully, trying to understand what he was seeing. But understanding something like this doesn't come easily, because the mind resists it, rejects it, looks for simpler explanations. But there were none. Not here. Not anymore. The bed was still. The chair remained in place. The toy lay where it had been left, and the scratches on the wall seemed almost alive now, as if they were still counting, still marking time. Even after all these years, one of the workers stepped further inside, his eyes scanning every corner. Then he stopped. "There's something here," he said, his voice low, uncertain. The others turned toward him. He was standing near the far corner of the room, looking down at something partially hidden beneath dust and debris. The owner moved closer, knelt down, and brushed away the dust slowly, carefully, because by now, they all understood something. Nothing in this room was accidental. Everything meant something. Everything told part of the story. And what they were about to find would complete it. As the dust cleared, a small wooden box appeared. Simple, worn, but intact. It had been placed there deliberately. Not thrown. Not forgotten. Kept. The owner stared at it for a moment, his hand hovering just above it. He hesitated, because deep down, he already knew whatever was inside that box would change everything. But the truth doesn't wait. It reveals itself, whether you're ready or not. He opened it. Slowly, the lid creaked slightly, the sound echoing softly in the enclosed space. Inside, there were only a few items. A folded piece of cloth, old, faded, a small metal object, unclear in purpose, and beneath them, a piece of paper, folded carefully, protected, preserved, as if someone had wanted it to be found. The owner picked it up gently. The paper felt fragile, as if it might fall apart at any moment, but it held. He unfolded it slowly. The edges cracked slightly. The writing was faint, uneven, written by a hand that had struggled, but it was still readable, still clear enough. And in that moment, the entire room seemed to grow quieter, as if even the house itself was waiting for the truth to finally be spoken. The owner took a breath and began to read. "If anyone finds this," his voice echoed softly. The workers stood still, listening, not moving, because every word mattered now. "Please understand, we did not choose this." A long silence followed, because those words alone changed everything. This was not an accident, not a misunderstanding, not a mistake. This was something done, something forced. The owner continued. "He said it was for our safety." One of the workers looked up slowly, confusion in his eyes. He said it would only be for a short time. The owner's voice grew quieter, that we would be let out. The room felt colder. We believed him. No one spoke, because belief was the most dangerous part. It meant trust, and trust meant betrayal. The owner swallowed slowly, and continued. The door was closed. His hands tightened slightly, and then the wall was built. The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. Someone had sealed them inside, not by accident, but by plan. We waited. The lantern flickered slightly. We called out. A worker lowered his head. We knocked. The sound seemed to echo in their minds. Knock, knock, knock. We thought someone would hear us. Silence filled the room. Because now, they understood those stories. Those sounds people had dismissed. Those moments that had been ignored. They were real. All of it. But no one came. The owner paused, his voice almost breaking now. Days passed. Then more days. We tried to keep track. The scratches on the wall suddenly felt different. Not marks, but memories. But it became harder. We became weaker. No one moved. No one breathed loudly, because they all knew what came next. Even before it was written, the owner looked down at the final lines. Then read them. Slowly. Carefully. If you are reading this. He took a breath. Then it means no one came in time. A worker turned away, unable to look any longer. And then, the final sentence. The one that would stay with them forever. This was not protection. A pause. This was punishment. The paper trembled slightly in the owner's hands. And just like that, the truth was complete. The family had not disappeared. They had not left. They had not been lost. They had been sealed, trapped, hidden behind a wall, by someone they trusted, left in darkness, while the world outside continued, as if nothing had happened. The knocking had been real. The sounds had been real. The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was the result of being ignored, forgotten, abandoned. The owner slowly folded the paper, placed it back into the box, and stood up. The room felt different now. Not mysterious, not unknown, just heavy. Heavy with truth, heavy with regret, heavy with something that could never be undone. He looked around one last time. At the bed, at the toy, at the scratches, at the space that had held a story no one had been willing to face. And then, he stepped out. The workers followed. One by one. No one spoke, because there was nothing left to say. The house was silent again, but not the same silence as before. This time, it was understood, because sometimes, the most terrifying thing is not the darkness. It's what was hidden inside it. And sometimes, the truth doesn't just reveal itself. It ruins everything. In the end, the house was never truly empty. For years, it stood in silence, not because there was nothing inside, but because everything inside had already been decided. The family that once lived there did not disappear. They did not leave in the night. They were not lost to time. They were placed behind a wall, sealed away from the world, cut off from light, cut off from sound, cut off from everything that makes a life a life. The room was not part of the house. It was added, built later, built with purpose, not to protect, not to preserve, but to hide, to bury something that someone never wanted the world to see. And for years that worked. The house remained closed. The story remained untold. And the truth remained hidden. But the truth has a way of surviving, even in darkness, even in silence, even behind walls. The knocking that people heard was real. The sounds they ignored were real. The fear they felt was real. But instead of listening, they chose to turn away. Because sometimes, the truth is not hard to find. It is hard to face. And that is where the real tragedy begins. Not in what happened inside that room, but in what didn't happen outside of it. No one broke the wall. No one opened the door. No one looked deep enough to understand what was wrong. And because of that, the people inside that room were never saved. The scratches on the wall were not just marks. They were time. Time slowly slipping away. Hope fading. Life being counted. One lie at a time. The toy was not just an object. It was a reminder that innocence was trapped in that darkness. And the letter was the truth. a voice that survived years of silence, just to be heard. This was not protection. This was punishment. Those words did not just explain what happened. They revealed something much deeper, something far more disturbing. Because the most frightening part of this story is not the room, is not the wall, is not even what was done. It is the silence of people who heard something and chose not to act, the silence of a world that moved forward while something terrible was happening just out of sight. Because sometimes evil does not hide in darkness. It hides in hesitation, in doubt, in the decision to do nothing. Today the house still stands, older, quieter, but no longer unknown. The wall is gone, the room is open, and the truth is finally seen. But it came too late, because some truths are not meant to be discovered after everything is over. They are meant to be found in time, before silence becomes permanent, before walls become final, before knocking stops. Because in the end, the most terrifying thing is not what was hidden behind that wall. It's knowing that it could have been opened at any time, and no one did.